here. Hey, everybody.
Hi. Hello.
Jolie.
Hi. Good to see you. How are you?
Hi. Yes, sure. Sorry. Put it where?
Hey.
Right there in front of the refrigerator.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Becky.
Hey, Becky.
Nice to meet you.
Hey there. Hi. What, Jolie? Tiana. Good to see you. Is that me?
That's
yeah.
you.
Awesome. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, everybody. Get my arms all over there. All right.
It's a good day for it, you know, with fighting gun violence. Good, I'm down to one. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it's orange.
Nicole and Alex, they live here. Nice to meet you. Nicole, nice to meet you. And this is Morgan, who also lives here. Can you say hello, Morgan?
See if they stay.
Shake hands. There you go. All right. What's that in?
Why don't you get this on your spot?
Welcome everyone. We want to get this meeting started. So we start with a quick wrap around the room and just introduce yourself by saying your name.
Tara. Becky.
Cullen.
Aaron. Bryn.
Kelly.
Brandy. Ellie.
Names.
Greg.
Here. Mike Greg right here.
Tanya. Tiana.
Ashley. Keisha.
James.
Kate.
Diane.
Excellent.
Hello, handsome. Yeah.
Oh, wait.
What are you watching? What are you watching?
No, I'm just trying to make room for you.
You looking at the darling.
You sit here.
No, I need to get.
You
Okay.
sit here. Staying right there.
Where's she going?
There we
She
go.
can't sit there.
He said, no, you're not sitting there.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you in the seat next to me, all right?
Hey, Tiana, Tanya's got to get over there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm up. You have to sit with me, okay? This is how we're gonna do it. All right. Ready? So you're gonna help solve everything, aren't you? Good.
Y'all
good.
got on orange?
Yeah, there we go. All right. These two.
A towel?
Oh, we spilled some.
I mean, how big is it?
Don't worry.
And if you need to get down, just let me know, all right?
If it's not like a major spill,
If it's not a major spill, it's not a big deal.
Tiana, could you pass us a couple more copies of the agenda? That's yours.
Welcome everyone. We want to get this meeting started. Can we start with a quick wrap up around the room and just introduce yourself by saying your first name?
I'm Ashley.
Talika.
Becky. Emma. Ellie.
David.
Hobbs. Becky.
Alex.
Bryn. Aaron.
James.
Gillespie.
Kathleen. Keisha.
Nancy.
Mars.
Come on, brother.
Nicole. Tara.
Oh, sorry. Quinton.
Tanya.
Tiana.
Laura.
What's your name?
Okay, we know the housing crisis impacts most people in Kansas City. How has the housing crisis impacted you or the lives of people close to you?
And that's a really great question. I'd say that the housing crisis in Kansas City has impacted me in a couple of ways. Number one, I have seen my clients over the last 20 years struggle not just to find housing that they can afford, but find housing that they can stay in that's safe, and that is near work and school. I don't know if you know my background, but I've spent the last 16 years as the head of the pro bono legal services department at my law firm. So I oversee all of the free legal work that we do. And most of my time I spend down at 25th and Cherry over at Family Court. And my clients are primarily kids that are in the juvenile justice system and parents whose kids have been picked up and put in foster care, kids who are in foster care, and then grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors who are taking care of kids that are in foster care. And the biggest impact that I have seen for my clients is, bottom line, I can usually find sometimes a place for a family to live just through good old-fashioned social work. But it's never near the school where the kids are. It's never near the job where a parent's working. It's never near a transportation line. And so we're not able to get all those things working, and then I can't keep my families together. So that's the biggest issue that I've seen in Kansas City.
Quinton, we know that the housing crisis impacts most people in Kansas City. How has the housing crisis impacted your life or the lives of people close to you?
Oh man, it's every day, every day. So when I was born, I don't remember from when I was born, but we stayed off of 52nd and Bell Fountain in a real raggedy spot. But we had a lot of family in there because my grandfather came back to town for a minute, so he was there, other family members were. These are just stories I've heard from my mother, but the landlords were not necessarily friendly people. And I remember when I was young getting to know about the landlord and the landlady and seeing them as these kind of evil folks. But anyway, then we moved a lot. We were homeless different times, staying in motels, nursing homes, other people's houses. And that was kind of that. And that basically continued through the time I graduated from high school. College and law school, I was fine, right? I came back to Kansas City. I've lived in the same building since I got back, 19th and Paseo, which is mixed income. But the interesting thing is, so it's a building, a bunch of one-bedroom apartments. I see a whole bunch of people that have 3 or 4 kids in there, that sort of thing. And the saddest part, of course, is that you see people moving all the time, too. You know, and people always ask me, well, do they move at the end of the semester of school? I'm like, no, people are just leaving whenever. And, of course, I've seen the posting on different doors of, the eviction notices, all that sort of stuff. I guess you see, the interesting thing about all these chats is y'all make my mama so mad because she does not like me sharing all her stuff. But we were evicted lots of times. I mean, and it's demoralizing. And, and they make this big ordeal, and you have for us sometimes back in the 90s, we actually would get the sheriff's deputy out, and they'd, do their sort of thing. So knew it a lot. And how does it still affect me? Other than talking to and being around the people that I see today, it still affects my family. So my sister's got 6 kids. She's now divorced. Husband doesn't really take care of anything. So, I mean, she's always trying to find different homes and spots, particularly for her older kids. When the older kids started getting in trouble, fights with the stepfather and all of that, I mean, life continues despite whatever. And then my other sister lives out in East KC off Blue Ridge. And she's able to have a house that's very humble, but trying to fix it up, doesn't have money to fix it up. And so, that's how we're seeing it now. And I know that, and then I forget my aforementioned mother, who stays in Parade Park, but the problem is they're not really keeping it up at all. So, I mean, she's had a broken toilet for probably 3 or 4 months. Which makes me sound like a bad son, because why don't you fix it? But, we keep trying to talk to the management. And they're like, oh, it's not our fault. So I went in there the other day, I'm like, well, it's the seat off and all of that. And that's just how it is. You got stuff crumbling, you've got other units that are coming run down, so that's how.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being here today. As you know, KC Tenants is a new organization led by people like me, the people impacted by housing injustice in Kansas City. We began organizing in February, and we've built a lot of power since then. In the primaries, we contacted 12,547 renters in Kansas City. We've knocked on over 3,000 doors, and the Kansas City Tenants in Action voter guide was viewed by nearly 2,000 people before on election day. More importantly, we're building a long-term power, and we're going to be around a long time after the election. We're putting out an update of voter guide Monday, and we are here today to clarify your position on our People's Housing Platform and to answer a few questions that have come up since the primary. First up, I would like to introduce you to my comrade, Tiana Caldwell.
Thank you. My name is Tiana Caldwell, and I am a leader with KC Tenants. To tell my story right, we have to start at the beginning. My family were slaves in Mississippi. My ancestors picked cotton. They were the property of white men. My grandfather and father both fought for the U.S. military abroad. Neither of them received benefits from the GI Bill, the legislation that was supposed to help veterans get educated and buy homes. so my family had no wealth by the time my mother was an adult. I grew up in poverty in Parsons, Kansas. My mom suffered from addiction and my dad was sent to prison. I did everything I could to get out of that situation. I took extra classes, put myself through community college. I set my life up to escape poverty, and eventually I got my nursing license. I got out of Parsons, but just when things were working out for me and my husband Derek, we were scammed. We tried to buy a house and we were preyed upon by greedy banks. We were sold a faulty mortgage and we lost everything. We finally found a place to rent and stayed a while. And then I was re-diagnosed with ovarian cancer last spring. We got behind in rent. The landlords took us to court and evicted us. With an eviction on our record, no one would rent to us. We were stuck in a place with sewage coming out of the pipes. We searched and searched for affordable housing and found nothing. We were homeless for 6 months. I know I'm not alone in the desperate and exhausting search for affordable housing. I'm angry about the conversation about what is supposed to be affordable in this town. It's not 80% of area median income downtown. I can't afford that. And I know the truth that truly affordable housing that we need will never be profitable for private developers to build. But if we're concerned with their profits, then we're missing the point. We need the city to step up and make an investment in housing that's for people and not for profit. Will you commit to a radical public investment in non-market housing that functions outside of the for-profit realm, and instead that the city, nonprofits, or communities collectively own and control?
I don't know about the word radical, but I will commit to absolutely everything else. I don't know what radical means.
It means that you're going to commit to make it happen, that you're not going to stop until it does happen.
Yeah, I'll commit to that.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Tiana.
that.
Thank you, Tiana. Now let me introduce.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being here today. We're here at Nicole's home, which, by the way, is in a complex owned by an out-of-the-country landlord called TEH Realty. They are one of the biggest evictors in the city. They put over 300 people on the streets every year. More on that later. As you know, KC Tenants is a new organization led by people like me, the people impacted by housing injustice in Kansas City. We began organizing in February, and we built a lot of power since then. In the primaries, we contacted 12,547 renters in Kansas City. We knocked on over 3,000 doors, and the Kansas City Tenants in Action voter guide was viewed by nearly 2,000 people before or on election day. Most importantly, we are building long-term power, and we're going to be around long after the election. We're putting out an updated guide on Monday, and we're here today to clarify your positions on our People's Housing Platform and to answer a few new questions that have come up since the February primary. First up, I would like to introduce you to my friend Tiana Caldwell.
My name is Tiana Caldwell, and I am a leader with KC Tenants. To tell my story, will you commit to radical public investments in non-market housing that functions outside of the for-profit realm, instead that the city, nonprofits, or communities collectively own and control?
I will, but this is my but. We got to do better than what we're doing at Housing Authority right now. Right? We can't just, I mean, they're doing stuff now. Half the time they got problems too in their own stuff. So when we talk about radical reform in it, it's not just, making more Housing Authority properties. What it needs to be is actually finding a way to construct accountable, right, management, creating, I think, frankly, more opportunities for people to move from renting to ownership without shady people that are kind of in between, because that's been something my family's dealt with forever too. And then, as you know, right, renters, we're all paying. I'm a renter too, right? We all end up paying more than we might be paying if we could actually get access to capital in our own communities and be able to buy a house and get some rehab money to help fix it up. Because all these programs we have right now, like with rehab, they're in a way inequitable, because only with a certain class of folks, right? You need to be a homeowner, usually had to be for a long time, right? It's just kind of a middle class and above program. What it's not enough of is something that's helping more people and new folks. So I think when we talk about radical reform, I mean, frankly, I want to kind of change up how the housing authority does everything, right, as a step one. As a step two, it's empowering more people to get into their own, to avoid bad landlords when they can. So getting them more ownership opportunities in the core of the city. I would like to have a lot more of that. And then fundamentally, it is just not seeing, I said this the other day, we're not going to incentivize our way out of the housing crisis, right? A percentage of something in 5 light ain't going to do anything, right? So yeah, we do need to think about it in a different way.
Thank you, Tiana, and thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Tiana. Now let me introduce you to my comrade, Ash.
Hi, I'm over here, sorry. I think I behind you. My name is Ashley. I'm a leader with Kansas City Tenants. I'm a middle school math teacher in North Kansas City. A year ago, my roommate moved away, so I was forced to live alone. It was impossible to find housing in the area that I could afford. I wound up living in a 350 square foot studio for $550 a month that ended up being infested with bed bugs. I am highly allergic to their bites and wound up in urgent care. Obviously, living in this situation was not safe for me, and it was not feasible for me to stay. The property owner refused to speak with me or meet with me, and only after tons of emails and agitation from me did he respond to an email saying that he didn't believe me and that he was positive that the building had no known bed bug issues. He refused to let me out of my lease and suggested that maybe my new IKEA furniture was to blame for the bed bugs. Luckily, I have the privilege of having family locally who are able to help me get out of that situation, house me temporarily, and get me a lawyer. But still, I lost all of my savings and was forced to move to a studio that cost $800 a month. I am now barely living paycheck to paycheck and have no savings to fall back on, while my former property manager is a known millionaire. This is not right. So you have said before that you think sending more lawyers to eviction court will solve issues of tenant exploitation and mistreatment. We do not feel this is enough. You have also committed to supporting a tenant bill of rights written by KC Tenants. Will you further commit to ensuring that the Bill of Rights includes just cause eviction requirements, protection from retaliation, that it gives tenants the first right of refusal, and how will you make sure that it is funded so that we can see enforcement and accountability?
So I have said I commit to a tenant bill of rights, and I will continue to commit to that. I also think that because I have run into this situation with my own constituents, where I have had constituents come to me and say that they are living in a house, an apartment, in a multifamily unit where the electricity's been out for 6 weeks, 6 months.
Yeah.
And we're running extension cords down the hall to get electricity in. And when they came to me, we were at a point where the multifamily unit should have been closed down. But the decision was, do we get the health department involved and close it down? Because that means everybody loses their home. So we had to come up with an innovative way to make sure that we got the electricity turned back on and people didn't lose their homes. Now here's the problem. We can accomplish some of these protections through a tenant bill of rights, and I agree with that. But I also feel like we're short in this town. I don't know if you have a suggestion on the Bill of Rights that we also have some sort of tenant board, because there needs to be something in place like that where we can address some of these issues outside of the court system to make sure that we're getting resolution. So that would be one thing that I would ask if we could have a part of this. I am not the kind of person who's going to sit here and I'm going to say yes to everything you said just to me right now, because I've not seen yet in writing what it looks like. But what I will guarantee you is this: every proposal that you bring forward, I will work to make sure that we get those in there, and that we will work with all stakeholders to make that happen. I can't make promises on specific things that I haven't read yet.
Well, see, and that's the thing is, like, since it hasn't been made, could we create it together?
Yeah, absolutely.
And can we be a part of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
When can we do this? Can I give you my phone number?
Well, yeah, no, I absolutely. And seriously, what you need to know about me is this. I've been an elected official for 13 years. First at the state senate, and now on the city council. And I've never to anyone said, yes, I will commit to voting for something until I read it. Will I commit to sit down with you and all stakeholders to write something? Absolutely I will.
Okay, because like we said, or I had the privilege of being able to get a lawyer.
Right.
you know, that was my only option to get out of that situation. But I know a lot of people don't, and people are profiting from my hell. And
No,
so
you're
I think
absolutely right.
a tenant bill of rights that gives us rights that we have to have under all circumstances is the answer.
Right. The thing that I'm thinking about, like I said, with the families that lived really close to me that were dealing with the no electricity, they were privileged because they knew that I held office hours every week and they knew where to find me. And so they came and they showed up and they said, here's the problem, and then I got them a free lawyer to help. That not everybody has that. Not everybody has the time to go find their elected official, and not everybody has the access to free lawyers. But yeah, of course, yeah, I mean, that's an easy one.
Thank you, Ashley.
Now let me introduce you to my comrade, Ashley.
You have said before that you think sending more lawyers to eviction court will solve issues of tenant exploitation and mistreatment. We don't feel that this is enough. You have already committed to supporting a tenant bill of rights written by, or written with KC Tenants. Will you further commit to ensuring that the Bill of Rights includes just cause eviction requirements, protection from retaliation, gives tenants the right to first refusal, and will you make sure that it is funded so that we can see real enforcement and accountability?
So I'll start from the back. Yeah, so happy to ensure it's funded. I mean, politics is a story sometimes of fighting about money, and we actually just had a debate about that down at Unity Temple, right, where everybody can find. And you know what, they're going to get mad at me, but I'm going to say it again. Right, we're having a conversation about $400 million on bike lanes, and I was getting insulted for trying to say, let's do $75 million for housing. I mean, that's off to me, dramatically, right? Because I don't think 75 is enough. And then in an earlier debate, I had an opponent who was telling me, like, oh, well, will you ever find this money? Right? I mean, it's there, and we need to do more of it. So that's step one, yes to fund it. On point two, your list included right of first refusal, just cause, anti-retaliation, discrimination.
Yeah, protection from retaliation.
Right. I think I would say yes to all. Here's what we got to make sure we do on the anti-retaliation. That is actually something we have tried to pass, and I'd like to bring that up again at the ordinance level. We still allow discrimination for housing voucher recipients too, which I think is wholly unacceptable. I wrote an ordinance that tried to ban that. Somehow it got changed on the floor throughout the process. That's something we need to go back and try to do again, because that's hitting a lot of people. Same thing with anti-retaliation. I think another thing that we need to do, because you're right, and maybe I said that more, lawyers and representation are always helpful, but I've never in any world, whether it be criminal justice, housing justice, anything, lawyers are not the only answer, right? Like, that's just not how the world works. A lawyer is there when the system's already broken.
And a lot of people don't have the luxury of getting a lawyer.
Almost no one has the luxury of getting a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, my view is, while expanded legal services are key and funding more legal services are important, and something that I will always do, because I do think it's important in the same way that if any of you get arrested for anything tomorrow and it's a serious enough offense to be in the county or state court, you'll have a lawyer standing next to you, right? And there are problems and messes whenever you'll have one. I think we should have the same thing in the world of housing, right? I think when you're looking at eviction docket, there is no reason we cannot fund people to be there for all of those, so that you actually at least get somebody who's speaking for you. And frankly, I know this from my own family's experience. My mother never fought a single one of those eviction suits. If y'all pull up her record now, a Missouri case now, you got a lot of stuff, right? Because she's like, oh well, I'm gonna lose anyway. Even if there were, as we'd say in law, meritorious defenses, like they didn't take care of anything, like the toilet was broken for him, like they broke what's called, as you all know, right, the implied warranty of habitability for ages, which happens in lots of these. And so I think that's important, but you're asking in terms of creating ordinances that create more progressive housing policy and more protections. I absolutely will do that, and I will work hard to make sure we actually get them passed in connection with it too. Because the one, I'll just say this and then I'll wrap, because I know y'all got stuff. What I'm scared of is, and I know y'all will make sure this doesn't happen, this cannot be just an election issue, right? Y'all saw it took us like it was mixed of you plus us introducing stuff at the council level. It took us 3.5 years to get any substantive housing legislation really even before council. And I wrote like 80% of it myself personally. Right? I can go get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? So what we need is to make sure that everybody's not just saying, hey, I care, you know, but it's about like making that long-term substantive change. And I'll tell you where to look out for the challenges, because I think I've told y'all this story before. When I was trying to meet about it, somebody from the mayor's office before was saying, yeah, this isn't really our big issue right now. So our priority is going to be pre-K. I think the world of young children, but nevertheless,
We know that
I'm like, you got it, and the real way to like make sure kids are growing up is that they actually have stable homes.
Yeah. Can you commit to helping us create the tenant bill of rights within your first 100 days?
Oh, sure. Hell, you know, look out for me. I might try to help you write some of it myself. Although, you know, I don't know if y'all trust my legal writing. I like that handshake. Handshake, right?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Ashley. Now allow me to introduce you to my comrade, Tanya.
My name is Tanya Bowman, and I am a leader with KC Tenants. My life has not been easy. I have been evicted before, and I've been in tight spots many times over. I was evicted again recently, and I'm living homeless right now. It's extremely stressful. I'm constantly hustling for the next job. I'm tired. I have dealt with a lot of shame and guilt for ending up in this situation again. My evictions are both a cause and a condition of my poverty. One thing that's become clear to me as I've been involved with KC Tenants is too many people, thousands a year, go through what I have to go through. It doesn't have to be this way. In Mayor Sly James' term in office, 75,102 people were evicted, nearly 9,000 a year, 42 a day. And of course, evictions are just the tip of the iceberg. Thousands live homeless and with horrible housing conditions or are constantly on the brink of being homeless. We can't wait for another 75,000 people to go through what I'm going through. With that in mind, what is your 100-day plan to take systemic action on the housing crisis in Kansas City immediately after you're elected?
Well, it sounds like the thing I'm being asked right now is to sit down with you and draft that Tenants Bill of Rights. Is that something that you would like to see in the first 100 days?
Of course, we would like to see that.
All right.
But okay,
so
go ahead. I think you covered that with her as far as soon as possible. Okay.
I mean, and can I commit? Will I sit here and promise you that that's done in the first 100 days? I can't promise anything because a Tenants Bill of Rights has to make its way through the City Council, which there's 13 people, including the mayor, and that means we got to get 7 votes, right? And so one of the things that I would commit to, though, is sitting down and starting that process and making sure that it's in the queue to keep moving forward. So that's one. One of the things that I have been incredibly frustrated with and that I don't think we should give up on is when I was down in the Senate, we tried to pass some legislation to have evictions removed from someone's record after a certain number of years, just like you do if you have a late pay on a bill or something like that. And we always got blocked down in Jefferson City, but it always kind of got lost in the mix too. So another thing that I would commit to doing in the first 100 days is working on figuring out a way to remove evictions from records. And if there's a local way to do it, I would. I think that's critically important as you're trying to get back into housing. It doesn't stop future evictions. I understand that. Mm-hmm. But if we've got that many people in our city who have evictions on their records, then we need to make sure that we're doing something to expunge those records. And so I would also commit in the first 100 days to figuring out ways to expunge that. And then frankly, one of the things I would know is what are the most immediate things we could be doing as a community to start to change this. And so I would want to know for cities that have seen a difference, or cities that have made one small change, what is the biggest thing we can do and go after it in the first 100 days.
Okay, so we're saying that that's your 100-day plan with us in mind. Basically, we're going to be following the whole time, tracking the whole thing. I mean, we want to be there. Okay?
I get that.
All right.
I get that.
Now allow me to introduce you to my friend Tanya.
My name is Tanya Bowman, and I am a leader with KC Tenants. My life has not been easy. I have been evicted before, and I've been in tight spots many times over. I was evicted again recently, and I'm living homeless right now. It is extremely stressful. I'm constantly hustling for the...
Thank you, Tanya. Now I want to introduce you to the comrade, Becky.
Right here. Hello. My name is Becky Mesqua. I have lived in Kansas City for roughly 4 years, and I have witnessed downtown developments that concern me. Developments like 1 Light, 2 Light, 3 Light, and most recently these micro apartments that are being advertised as affordable. We heard your answer at yesterday's forum about Cordish and their recent proposal to build affordable units as small as 315 square feet for $750. You stated that you would not live there and that it is not affordable housing. It feels like Kansas City is being seduced by big developers, and we're trying to be something that we're not. These developments make me wonder who they're being built for, because they most definitely are not being built for people like me. If Cordish developments become the norm, people like me will be driven out of Kansas City. I envision a Kansas City that is inclusive, however I fear that this will not be the case if we keep subsidizing luxurious developments. Transparency with KC Tenants is necessary, as we are the ones affected by such developments. As we know that you have taken money from developers, how will you reject their advances when they come to you with more deals that would sell us out?
A couple of things. I want to say first and foremost that I did say I would not live in that micro unit. I also said, though, that there may be individuals who might be interested in that micro unit. I also agreed with you, though, that it was not affordable. And so one of the things I want to make sure that I'm clear on is that there may be individuals who would be interested in that micro unit. But if we are saying that that is affordable, that's a different conversation altogether. So let's just kind of park that piece there. One of the things that I've suggested in the debates is that I would make public my schedule so that people can see who I'm meeting with on a weekly basis. And I think that's a level of transparency that we haven't seen in the past. So one of the things that I would like to do is make sure that folks know that if I'm going to be having a meeting, and I'm going to be meeting with a developer, that you know I'm meeting with the developer, so that if later on you see that I've...
With that in mind, what is your 100-day plan to take systemic action on the housing crisis in Kansas City immediately after you are elected?
Yeah, first of all, you don't need to be ashamed at all, right? I mean, I think I'm glad that you mentioned the 75,000 number. So many people, like, when growing up, like everybody I knew, right, had been touched by the housing crisis, and I think everybody continues to be. Whether you're going through eviction or not right now, touching every neighborhood of our city, right, every school district. In terms of the first 100 days, not only am I interested in passing ordinances, but we need to find money, right? And we need to find money with the same fervor that we're finding money for things like bike lanes, garages, park improvements.
New airport.
Right. I mean, what we need is kind of a mix of two things, money and passion. If you have passion, then the money starts to take care of itself. And too often at City Hall, we haven't had the passion to make dramatic, substantial change. For example, for the last 4 years, y'all probably could turn on the news any day and people are talking about an airport. I'm like, I don't care about an airport. I really don't at my core, right? Because it's like, okay, it'll be good, it'll be bad, whatever. But if we still have folks that are dealing with all of this, then how is this a better city? So my first 100 days is actually directing the city manager, right, to find our source of funds, and not just them saying, hey, we don't have it, right? Figuring out how we can actually start funding some of these priority areas that we had said, and making sure that we're actually finally, right, finishing substantial housing policy, including our Tenants' Bill of Rights issues. And that's the first 100 days will be done, what is that, October 31st or November 1st? So I'd like to have it done by then.
Thank you.
And the best thing about that, by the way, I want y'all all to know, city budget cycle. We always get our budget, right, late February, and, and then we vote on it like a month later. And so what we need to make sure is that you know that we need to put this housing, these priorities, in the budget before. So really by the fall, we need to be on top of what is it we need, what concretely do we want to fund. Do not let some councilman, I'll throw shade on myself, don't let us just do a whole bunch of resolutions. Our resolutions like resolved, we want everybody to be happy. We do that every week. Don't do it, don't do it. Make sure that you're saying to people, all right, so where's the budget priority? Because our next meeting should be, if I'm elected and all of that, should be, all right, Lucas, no, really, where's it coming from? Like right now, I don't want ideas, I don't want anything else. I want to know that the city managers identified our source of funds and we're going with it.
Thank you, Tanya. Now let me introduce you to my friend Becky.
Hello, my name is Becky Amespa. I have lived in Kansas City for roughly 4 years, and I have witnessed downtown developments that concern me. developments like 1 Light, 2 Light, 3 Light, and most recently these micro apartments that are being advertised as being affordable. We heard that you think the Cordish proposal to build the affordable units as small as 315 square feet for $750, you stated that you would not live there and that it is not affordable housing. It feels like Kansas City is being seduced by big developers, and we're trying to be something that we're not. These developments make me wonder who they're being built for, because they're not being built for people like me. If Cordish developments become the norm, people like me will be driven out of Kansas City. I envision a Kansas City that is inclusive. However, I fear this will not be the case if we keep subsidizing these luxurious developments. Transparency with KC Tenants is necessary, as we are the ones that are affected by these developments. We know that you've taken money from developers. So how will you reject their advances when they come to you with more deals that would sell us out?
Same way I always have, by telling them no, right? I mean, I've different occasions. They hated almost everything in our list of housing ordinances, many of which we have passed. And so I think the easiest way to do it is this. Yeah, you just get, you figure out where your candidates and where your folks are from. I mean, and I know there are people that can sell out and all that sort of stuff, and maybe you'll be like, yeah, this Lucas is selling out enough. It's fair challenge. You know, I still got a mom, right, who lives in the middle of the city. I still got family that lives in, I still live, right, in a building with those sorts of issues. And look, I've never forgotten that there for the grace of God go I, because I've run into my life challenges sometimes too. I've been blessed that it isn't money related, but look, if you are particularly a person of color, although it affects a whole bunch of people, but living in this city and dealing with issues and all that sort of stuff, you don't forget it, and I won't. And so, I mean, what we need to do is, yeah, make sure we're still fighting for this. That's why I like policies, actually. Because the way we get seduced by developers is there's no policy at all, right? If they're just operating and like, well, this seems good, and 750 is cheaper than 1,400, and everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, that sounds good. That's the way that things actually get done way too often when you haven't introduced policies and initiatives like that. Now, on the fundraising thing, I'd love to have public financing of campaigns, like more progressive cities like New York City has, a number of others, that would actually get money, the incredible amount of money out of politics. This mayoral race, most of it not raised by me, but in terms of what the candidates have raised, plus outside groups, which is the other reason that, like, you could get us to stop accepting developer money tomorrow, but then look out for those outside groups, the ones that run all the racist ads. You know, there's going to be $3 million in this race before the end of it, $3 million. And so I think if we actually got to a more public financing model, we'd be in a much better place.
Yeah, because I definitely think there's an issue between accepting this money, obviously, and then because it seems like they would want a refund, right? They want a return from the money they are giving to campaigns, etc. So obviously transparency is important in these deals, and as KC Tenants, we need that transparency. So will you commit to monthly meetings with KC Tenants for transparency and open communication?
Sure. I mean, I want y'all to make your meeting open to other people though too. Is that okay?
What do you mean, like?
Meaning I don't have closed meetings. So the one thing I'm saying is, like, if I'm meeting with KC Tenants, you got to let other people come in. That's it. I don't know who those other people are, but I'm just saying that's my, because you don't want me doing the closed meetings with developers, right? No. And so that's just the one thing I would ask from you too. Because transparency is perfect. In fact, the final 6 days of the campaign, I hope we can run into each other. Because there'll be cameras following me around for something, you know. And I'll be mic'd up the whole time, and frankly, I think if we had public officials doing that more often, then maybe some of the stuff that happens wouldn't happen the same way.
Okay, we will be in contact with you.
Okay, you got my cell phone number. I give everybody my cell phone number, so.
To follow up with this and to see what these meetings would look like so that we can foster this relationship.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
That I think could help with transparency is the mayor letting the city know who she's meeting with.
Okay. And I do have a follow-up question to that. Can you commit to monthly meetings with KC Tenants to foster this transparency?
I don't know if I personally can commit to monthly meetings, and do you want to know why?
Yes.
I've committed to a whole lot of meetings.
Okay.
I have committed to, for instance, bringing the mayor, the city manager, all of the director heads out into the neighborhoods and into each district on a monthly basis. I've committed to meeting with all sorts of different groups, but I can commit to making sure that we are having regular check-ins and regular meetings. I will not say today that I'm going to commit to a monthly meeting because I don't want you to be disappointed if I can't do it on a monthly basis.
Okay, so with that, so you're saying that you are open to having regular check-ins and regular meetings, which we do appreciate. What would something like that look like? Is that something that we can like touch base with you on? And when can we touch base with you on that?
Well, first of all, we obviously have to get past June the 18th, yeah. Right? So it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to check in before then. But let's do this. As I move forward, and I am putting together my transition team, and I am putting together who I'm going to be hiring and what their different focus areas are. That will all be happening obviously between June 19th and August 1st when the next council takes office. So let's make sure that you touch base with me early in that time frame so that we can get something on the calendar to talk about what that looks like.
Okay, I definitely will.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Now let me introduce you to my comrade, Bryn Musser.
My name is Bryn Musser. I'm from St. Joe, and I moved to Kansas City seeking a diverse and interesting place to be a young person. Now I work as a public health researcher, and I've devoted my studies to understanding the link between childhood asthma and historical housing discrimination here in Kansas City. I've been just starting to learn that Kansas City actually invented some of the worst of racism in housing policy. I believe that white people enjoy structural advantage and rights that other races and ethnic groups do not, both at a collective and an individual level. I also believe that it's our responsibility as white people, particularly white people with economic and political power, to perform the humbling and difficult daily work of unlearning what the dominant culture in America tells us, that white people are assigned value, morality, goodness, and humanity, while people of color are worthless, immoral, bad, inhuman, and undeserving. In your responses to our voter guide, you left one question blank, and it was, how will your housing plan address historic and systemic racism in Kansas City? What are some of the ways in which you're working on your own internalized white supremacy, and how will your housing plan address historic and systemic racism in Kansas City?
So I didn't know I left that blank, so thank you. I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I have really learned, not just in the last year, but in the last 20 years, but frankly in the last year more than ever, is that Kansas City has decades of racial and economic discrimination, of segregation, and it's because of intentional policies that were put in place by people who founded the city. And you can't just have conversations and hope that that's going to solve things. It's going to take intentional policies to reverse that. And so one of the conversations that I had just last night, for instance, is the importance of making sure that there is someone who is in my office, and that's all I can do in the beginning is someone in my own office. I would propose, however, that this moves into a position at City Hall as we get the next budget cycle and the City Council to approve these things. But someone who is dedicated to coming up with very specific intentional policies that will address the systemic racism and inequity that the city has put in place intentionally so that we can intentionally remove that. And that's going to mean some tough conversations, and I'm willing to have those.
What about our own personal work of eliminating those implicit biases that we were just socially conditioned?
Right, and that piece has been one of the things that I have been doing. You know, obviously, you can go through all of the diversity and inclusion trainings that people will offer up to you, and that's great. But you know what? The hardest work is sitting down and talking to individuals like I'm doing right now about how these policies, about how systemic racism has resulted in what we have now. And so part of my personal growth will be continuing these conversations. And by the way, not just having conversations, but taking substantive policy moves that we can do after that, and then advocating to get them passed, even when it's not easy.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. That's a personal question. One more. I was hoping to get some clarification on one other aspect of your questionnaire responses. The term stakeholders, you used it 6 times in your answers.
Yep.
Who specifically do you consider to be stakeholders? Because we don't consider people with profit motives related to housing to be true stakeholders in this issue. Would you consider developers, landlords, or management companies to be stakeholders?
We're going to have someone from that group at the table. And it stinks. And I know that. But the reality is that you have to bring all voices to the table, even the most polarizing. So what has been left out in the past is having tenants at the table. It just hasn't happened. But I don't stop there. I also, when I say, and it can't be dominated. There has to be someone who's willing to have the conversation. There has to be. Because at the end of the day, we can come up with all of the Bill of Rights that we want, but if we can't get the city council to vote for it, then it's just an idea that's sitting out there. And the way you get the city council to vote for it is to bring together 7 votes to move that forward. And so, yeah, we're going to have someone from the management side at the table. I also want someone from the health department at the table, and I want someone from the housing department, and I want someone from every single part of city government that is impacted by this. But yeah, when I mean stakeholder, I mean all voices.
Okay. I think we just consider it to be a very different stake to be looking for housing as a shelter, as like a hierarchy of need, as opposed to it just being capital or profit revenue for you. So
you are correct that those are 2 completely different issues. But the only way that you can affect public policy is to bring all sides together. If we did something without that, we would either not get the votes, or we'd get sued and be thrown out, any number of things. I'd rather get this right. And sometimes it's incremental, and I understand that incremental is ridiculous because you have been waiting too long. I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Now let me introduce you to my comrade, Bryn Musser.
My name is Bryn Musser. I'm originally from St. Joe, but I moved to Kansas City about 15 years ago, seeking a diverse and interesting place to live. Now I work as a public health researcher, and I've devoted my studies to understanding the link between childhood asthma and historical housing discrimination here in Kansas City. It's really clear to me that for Kansas City to remain a place where I want to live, we're going to need systemic action on housing right now. We appreciate that you've introduced many of the housing ordinances that the City Council has recently considered, but what concerns us is that not many of those ordinances have been brought to the floor. Many of them have just stayed in the Housing Committee. Others have gotten a vote, but they haven't been funded yet. From an outside perspective, it could seem like you're introducing good stuff when it's politically expedient, but you aren't necessarily committed to the follow-through. How can you guarantee to us that you will actually take the systemic and bold action that we so desperately need if elected?
So first, I'll disagree with the premise of your question, right? I wrote 8 pieces of legislation personally. All but 2 have been passed out. The 2 that have not been passed out, one is the housing policy resolution. I mean, I'll just be honest. There aren't that many children around. If you want people who just pass bullshit resolutions and pieces of legislation, then vote for people who do that. I'm not somebody who's going to do that. So yes, I could have just been like, yeah, I'm just going to pass the means nothing at all, you know, whatever. That's not how I roll, and I think that's a complete and utter waste of time. And by the way, I think that's 50% of legislation that comes out of City Council, right? Including particularly our quality of life stuff. So part of the reason that we have seen both our 2 resolutions or ordinances exist left. One is the housing policy resolution. Bless his heart. The other is the percentage affordable set aside. The problem with the percentage affordable set aside ordinance, right, was that actually if it passed tomorrow, it would not actually address issues like the Cordish micro units deal, right? Because however good the writer of the ordinance was, there were things we weren't thinking about, right? I'm guilty as charged on that. And so I think, and last week, I shared it with some folks and tweeted about it. We'll have a housing committee meeting this Wednesday, actually, at 11:15, unfortunately. But we'll keep moving on all of these. we're trying to get a number that is more, I think, appropriate for what is the cap of affordability. And to explain that ordinance, the problem is this: until 2018, an ordinance I introduced, developers were just saying, yeah, we'll build affordable housing, but we have no promise in connection with it. When we signed the Cordish deals in, I think, 04 or 05, like they promised to build affordable, but then it turned around and they were saying $1,400 units downtown were affordable. I thought that was a problem. So a piece of legislation I wrote and passed was the one that got us to 100% of AMI or below. What that meant was that you could not get any incentives if none of your units were below that or above that, or whatever. You can take my point. And so, but the challenge was that's a high number, right? That was too high a number. And by the way, that piece of legislation, for whoever asked me, actually greatly annoyed developers too, because they wanted almost no controls. And so then the next challenge becomes, how do we get it to a lower number, right? And I was going with, incorrectly when I wrote the ordinance in September, going with this idea of, well, what number feels right and how can I, in essence, justify it? Where really the idea is, I think we need to get more to a price per square foot, which is something different. So the 350 square foot unit, they can't just say, well, it's less than $1,000, so it's all right, right? We get to something more concrete. The other challenge is this, and y'all know the HUD different bands of folks. The real crisis is, there is a crisis for median income wage earners, don't get me wrong, because often they find themselves in situations where they're in trouble too. But we have a real crisis at the extremely low income level, which is how HUD describes it. Those who are making between $0 and, probably 20%, 40% of area median income. And those are lots of folks and lots of working folks. Well, I want us to work on more so, and this ordinance, by the way, that ordinance won't do it, is a way that we can actually better create and fund opportunities at the extremely low income level. And that's what I would want for us. But in terms of, do my pieces of legislation just languish? I don't think so. I mean, I'm proud of the work we've done. Actually, I'm greatly proud of it, because otherwise nothing would happen, right? I mean, we needed to pass a housing trust fund, because the problem was going to be and I think I've done a favor, let's say I lose tomorrow or next week. At least there is somebody who can pick it up and say, hey, we need to fund this housing trust fund. Because having been at City Hall, I've seen what happens when you don't have a fund set up, where you haven't already passed the ordinances. Then you're just like, hey, can I get $2 million for housing? And they're like, no, you can get it for demolition. You can get it for something else. And so to an extent, they always talk about an infrastructure, creating shovel-ready projects, right? Those are the ones that get funded. I've made it my life's work in this housing stuff to have shovel-ready, right, priorities.
Thank you for that. I have one follow-up question. So we know that you're very knowledgeable on housing issues, and we do appreciate that. But we don't want to be cut out of the process just because you've already had some good ideas that you've written and ordinances that you cooked up. So how do you plan to work with us as true partners to develop your housing agenda if elected? And additionally, so two-part question, you use the term stakeholders many times in your questionnaire. To be clear, we don't consider people with profit motives related to housing to be true stakeholders on this issue. So would you consider developers, landlords, or management companies to be stakeholders?
That was interesting. Y'all teaching me something new. I never have thought about it that way. Part of the reason I probably used the phrase stakeholders was because, and I know y'all tell me I get too academic sometimes, so here's the thing. In the 60s and 70s, our country was just building a lot more housing projects, right? Depending on the levels of success, I mean, my family grew up in some of them, right? Wayne Minor, all that sort of stuff. I didn't, because they were gone, but my folks did. So I don't know if we as government alone can solve the problem. And that's why, in some ways, you need to work with the private market. And so, I mean, I'll continue to, right? We're talking about right now some of these pieces of legislation that you all are supporting relate to regulation of private market folks. And so, I don't know. I think we can still talk to them, right? I don't know if that's unnecessary, because frankly, I think there are some who actually would have a more positive viewpoint on how do we create housing. Because fundamentally, I think it actually makes business sense to have a city of people that actually have stable housing, right? Our great employees can do all these other things, right? Great students, right? You're building a workforce, you're doing all that sort of stuff. So maybe that was my point on letting I'm always going to talk to everybody. I'd be lying to you if I'm saying that I won't, because I think that's what our job is. And so the one thing that I have appreciated from this movement, though, is that there are a lot more of you than them. But too often we don't actually hear everyone's voice, and maybe that's meeting times. Although we had our evening housing meetings, and it was still mainly homeowners who were middle class and above who showed up. That's why you can't just move City Hall to the neighborhoods and fix it all, right? You need to do more things like actually reaching out to groups, making sure you, the elected office holder, are walking around, talking to people, all of that. And to me, that's what it means. But in terms of stakeholders versus not, I'm somebody who wants information. I want to expand my knowledge area too. And I appreciate y'all for doing it. The developers have actually, they do a fairly effective job of conveying information, right? I need more of the public to do.
Yeah, I think, so first of all, just to say that I think that ultimately we do believe that housing is a basic human right. And so done in the way that we need it to be done and in the magnitude, I don't know that we, that it will ever be profitable for developers. So just that's our official, well, that's a stance. Yeah. But the first part of the question was, how do you plan to work with us as true partners to develop your housing agenda if elected?
Right, so I don't just take my own ordinances and say, I've answered it myself already. Because I haven't. I don't plan to work with y'all. Well, step one, listen to you all. The last time I was probably in a house where I got evicted was 2000. That was 20 years ago. And so, you know, so things probably have changed. Actually, not enough has changed. But, right, there might be some differences now. I need to learn more about it. So what I want is to listen, to actually have more consistent lines of communication that are open. I think in terms of the policies we're writing, this is one thing that's good about being a mayor. You actually get more staff who can help you create and write these things. So you're not kind of doing what I was doing, which is coming up with stuff, but instead you're listening to people and you're incorporating it. And you're studying other cities that have done it when people here tell us it's impossible, which happens all the time. And so, I mean, and then I think after you get the final product, more often I probably would like to run things by you before. You know, I had a bunch of people yell at me when I introduced all those housing ordinances because they're like, oh my God, you didn't go back to the community. Because I'm like, because we would have never introduced anything. Now I think we're in a sufficient time where folks are paying attention and we have the opportunity to say, hey, let's make this piece of legislation better. And frankly, the one other thing that I want to empower anyone to do, including yourselves, let's organize and make sure that we can take over a city council meeting just like the landlords have been able to for about 2 years.
Could there potentially be appointed councils that we would be appointed onto?
Or what? A point of contact?
I know that some of the committees can only be elected officials, but when there are roles for average citizens, could we have seats at those tables?
Yeah, but here's what the one thing I want to say. So yes, is the answer. Part two of that answer is, and again, if you have a different mayor than I do, make sure they're not just appointing people, but they're empowering them with information and access to things. There are like 140 boards right now. A lot of the boards have good human beings on them that don't know what the hell is going on, right? I served on the Board of Zoning Adjustment out of the 3rd District Representative. I don't know what that board is about. I went to a law school in the Ivy League, right? It was supposed to be good. And I'm just still like learning stuff and not understanding. So we need to make sure not only are you saying, hey, okay, you have your seat, but that you make sure that every board member is entitled to the same set of information. If they have questions, there's actually city staff available to help them with it. If they make information requests, they can get it, right? I mean, that's the reform I want to see in the whole board system. because you can't just have people representing and not give them the opportunity to really represent a fair way.
Thank you, Brian. As I said before, my name is Gillespie, and I am a leader with KC Tenants. This is my home. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up and was basically by myself from the beginning. I couldn't count on a meal any day of the week, so I started looking out for me. That's why you see my vegetable garden outside, freezers full of produce, and all my provisions stacked up around the house. I have been hungry before, but I don't like being hungry. I never know who or how many I might have to feed, and I've been told you should not worry about the future, but you should prepare for it. Now I'm worried about my future in this house. I've lived a lot of different places. I've been homeless, both with a small child and on my own. I've been addicted. I've been stuck in unsafe situations with abusive partners. Because of keeping a roof over my head, I've really been thrown through the ringer. When it comes to my housing, I finally found a home here. I've been here 13 years. I love this place and all my neighbors. I'm on a Section 8 voucher, and for the past 10 years I was here with no problem. The landlord was responsive, always. He told me I was the best tenant he had. I was always on time with my rent, and I had asked Gary to do. He would say, I can't do it today, but I'll be there tomorrow. He never let me down. But then Gary died, and his son took over managing his properties, and that was where my problem started. Now this house is killing me. It's falling in disrepair. Steve doesn't respond to me. There's mold in my basement. I already have lung problems because of my health issues working on banisters. Now I'm doubled over, just trying to walk down the street. When it rains, it comes in through the foundation and across the basement floor. It's still wet down there from the past couple of rains, and that makes the mold worse. There are roaches, my outlets don't work, there are rats and mice all over. I've lost 4 refrigerators and 3 stoves. And you can smell the spoiled milk from them chewing through my milk cartons that's on the 3rd shelf from the ceiling. There's a big rat that keeps chewing through my milk cartons. The rodents go and chew up the insulation and the wires in my appliances. None of my appliances were usable at the last Section 8 inspection, but the inspector moved so quick through here, he didn't even leave a footprint on the floor. You think that someone with so many properties will have a maintenance team, but Steve doesn't. It's just him and the painter dude, Maurice. I can't live like this. I'm tired of my home making me sick. I'm tired of my landlord making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month and not doing jack shit with it to keep up his profits. So I ask you to take an action on my behalf, and I want to show my landlord that his behavior is unacceptable and that he will be held accountable. Will you be willing to sign this letter? To my landlord, to ask him to repair the rotten insulation in my basement, to address the rodents, cut the trees off my roof, install gutter caps around my house, and to fix my outlets.
Yeah, sign that.
Pen, please.
Thank you.
Rents were too high. We ended up, I'm sorry. We lived in an extended stay hotel for a while. Max was extremely abusive to my son Alex and tried to kill him several times. Beat him. That's not going to happen in front of me. Don't go after my kids because I will throw hands every time. I had enough. I found this place when they had a rent special going. This was supposed to be my saving grace, getting away from my ex. People in the office here, they smelled my desperation. They told me it was move-in ready. When we got here, the apartment wasn't cleaned. We didn't have hot water for 3 weeks. We had to heat up water for my little one to take a bath and carry it up 2 flights of stairs. Now, mind you, this is in February, in the dead of winter. Okay? The fridge was busted. We had to throw away some of Alex's insulin. He's type 1 diabetic. If you know anything about insulin costs, that hurt. I cried. There are mice all over the place. Until last week, our AC was broken. Even though I was requesting repairs, I didn't see the maintenance guy for months, and I do mean months. The railing by the front door has been broken since we got here. Now, a few weeks ago, I slipped and tried to grab for it. I ended up on my back and my wrist. I was in a ton of pain. I went to my doctor, and I now have whiplash in my neck. They came by to fix the railing last week by, you saw, wrapping the baling wire around it. I regret signing the lease here. I honestly wish I would have rather stayed in the hotel. I was desperate, and they knew it, and they took advantage of me. And now I feel guilty. I can't let my kid play outside. There's gunshots here almost every night. We tried to order dinner the other night. Nobody would deliver here after dark. No one. I always pay my rent on time every month. Every month. I deserve a safe place to live with my kids. My child should not have to worry about his safety just trying to catch the school bus. I recently got approved for Section 8. Even though this place is far from perfect, it would be good to keep my family stable for a while. There's no way we can stay, there's no way this place is going to pass a Section 8 inspection unless something changes. So, Councilman Lucas, I want you to stand with me. Will you sign this letter to the management company demanding that they take immediate action to make my apartment livable by fixing my handrail, completely sealing my doors, treating the entire complex for rodents, and hiring security to patrol from dusk to dawn?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for standing with us. Thank you so much for that. Now, will you commit to an in-person meeting with me and the management company if they don't take action by the end of next week?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right. And I got one more ask for you.
All right.
One more. Would you be willing to spend the night here next Saturday so you can experience a night in this property owned by the biggest evictor in Kansas City?
You know I'm willing to do that.
All right. Yes.
Be happy to.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Alex, Nicole's son. I'm female to male transgender. Finding housing that is truly affordable, accessible to people living with disabilities, and safe and accepting for transgender people like myself is difficult, pretty damn near impossible, excuse my French. On top of everything my mom talked about, I wanted to add an ask as well. What are your thoughts on how to prioritize accessible and inclusive homes for all, and can you commit to enforcing the requirements for accessibility and inclusivity as part of our Tenant Bill of Rights?
So short answer on the back one is yes, absolutely. In terms of what it is that what we're going to do, we need to make sure we're actually requiring developers, really landlords, to be held accountable more often. You know, healthy homes is a step, but I think the big thing that follows, why I think these pieces of legislation, to Bryn's question, take real thought and time, is because we need to have an enforcement mechanism with all of them. Because Kansas City, Missouri is a decent place. We've actually passed lots of things that say what people should be doing, but we don't enforce. We don't have a budget to help enforce. We don't take punitive action when we don't. We take punitive action when people don't pay their earnings tax, right? Right? We do all these sorts of things. So no, I absolutely would agree to that. And frankly, I mean, my big kind of dramatic plan, and I don't like new bureaucracies, but we need the housing department to really go back to being a housing department that is looking out for the best interest of regular people. Because by not having one, it's kind of a reactionary, let's spend our federal money, and otherwise, let's do code enforcement. And that's about it. And that's inconsistent and all types of problems there, too. And so, no, that's something that I will make a clear priority. I mean, I said this in a debate earlier, so you have me on the record lots of times. There's some mayors that dream of airports or stadiums, right? I'll be a mayor who does not want a single thing named after me. I just want people to have access to safe, quality, affordable housing in neighborhoods like the one I grew up in.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Do you have any questions for us, Ms. Johnson?
We do have a question. We've talked a little bit about, obviously, what you want to see from me. Some of the things we've talked about are regular check-ins. We've talked about getting things done within 100 days. We've talked about very specific things that we want. What would you want to see at the end of 100 days is the first question.
Please put some input. Yeah.
I'm currently homeless right now because I called codes on my landlord.
Okay.
There's a loophole in the law if you have a month-to-month lease. My heater exploded. We didn't have heat for 2 months this winter. And I want that loophole closed. I don't want somebody else to be afraid to ask for heat. Not
Right.
nothing major, but heat. My heater literally like kaboom exploded. And for me, that's one of my biggest stakes in here is my son and me should not be having to live in a shelter right now. All because we just wanted heat.
Okay.
But that does cause eviction part of the 10th Bill of Rights we're fighting for. I have a huge stake in that. Because no other family should be afraid to be like, hey, my landlord's not doing a job. The city's supposed to help us. I can guarantee the code inspector got paid off because that case is still open at that house.
So the biggest loophole that you're seeing there is when you call codes, and this is similar to what I was talking about where I didn't call codes for my neighbors because I knew that they would get evicted.
Well, no, the landlord, because with a month-to-month lease, the landlord does not have to give you a reason to give you a 30-day notice. They just have to give you a 30-day notice and tell you to move. So even though it was attached to my counterclaim, he'd already tried to evict me once and I won that because the heater was broke.
Okay.
His lawyer gave the advice, oh, well, she has a month-to-month lease, just give her a 30-day notice.
So this is a state law that you want fixed. All right, I can't fix a state law in 100 days.
That would just cause eviction. If the landlord actually has to give you a reason, then you have the state
Saying say we could look at passing that at the city level is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll look at that.
We have one over here, James.
Yep.
See the base for affordable housing come down.
Yes.
Have you talked at all with the folks at the Kansas City Public Schools and their definition of affordable housing, and are you comfortable with where they define it compared to where it is now? Does anybody know?
I think you've had a more recent conversation with KCPS than I have at this point, but I think we basically see eye to eye with some differences.
Okay.
I think we agree on a lot more than the city might assume. But basically the way we define it, and for my research, and I think many people in this room have studied this issue extensively, the real demand among working families and poor families in Kansas City is at a level around 20% of area median income. And the lowest we're talking about in this city right now with the PIEA and all those other agencies, the lowest they'll talk about is 50%, which is way more than most of the folks in this room can afford.
Okay.
It just opens the door for a lot of exploitation.
Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yep.
Would you be willing for me to take you a tour of my home?
Of course.
Sure. Let's do that. Well, let's do that after we get a couple more, because I know a few more people might want to shout out some ideas for 100 Day. Yeah, Diane.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because I thought about that, and really I'm out trying to Uber now to get my rent together for this month. I'm already late, and I pay like 60 to 70% of my Social Security, because I'm 69 years old, but 70% and then another 20% for my utilities, because I pay $200 a month for utilities. And the reason I'm short is because I had the privilege of having cable for a few months, and they hiked the cable up to $200 a month. Off of $1,300 a month, and $700 for rent, and then utilities. Nobody can do that, and it's totally, the 20% is almost palpable, almost doable, and to be able to live in dignity and not feel like I'm having to beg. And I'm not on Section 8, I'm not on those things, but everybody should have it, whether they're on Section 8 or not.
So we've heard so far from Brandy about just cause evictions and ending retaliation.
Yeah.
We heard from James and Diane about redefining affordability. Does anyone else have 100-day demands? Yeah, Kelly.
I'd like to see a tenant on the housing committee. Somebody who rents their house on our housing committee.
Tenant on the housing
committee.
Oh, tenant.
Which housing committee? The one that, I know Lucas is on it, Wagner's on it, the one that comes up with our 5-year housing plan. I would just like to see someone who rents their house has an opportunity to interject. So those are all city council elected positions, but let's figure out a way to make voices heard, listened to, input being received and implemented. Housing committee is made up of all elected officials. As a mayor of Kansas City, I cannot put a non-council person onto a housing committee. But let's figure out how to amplify the voice. And let's keep that conversation going.
I would like to know, how often can they put a limit on the time they can raise the rent? Seems like I hear that people's rent get raised every year.
Oh, it can get raised every year, and it can be even more than that if you don't have a year lease. It's not
so, I mean, that could make it more affordable if so often they shouldn't be able to just raise the rent every year.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd like to explore more with you is the idea of, as we're making more affordable housing, truly affordable housing, in every way that we need to make it, because I think one of the quickest ways we could do it is by very quickly working, and part of that was in one of these questions with our folks that are already doing this hard work, small developers, not the big developers, you know, our philanthropic groups, the nonprofits, the folks who are actually like Catholic Charities and other who are actually working on housing right now. I'd like to explore with you some of the ideas we have about creating land trusts and possibly creating areas where rents don't rise, or don't rise only a certain amount over time. I want to have you at the table to talk about that, because I don't know how to stop that, and it'd be nice to find out if there are ways to do that.
What about a citizen review board that can oversee what's going on and come back to the housing committee with recommendations on what is going on? So they want to hear from the citizen review board about what they see out there and how they can interject with them.
Maybe the way we approach some of these things in general is to create a housing committee that's not a city council committee. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
anyone have any final thoughts before we wrap up this section?
Yeah. You did speak about how you were going to try to end within the 100 days about the evictions falling off. Do you think that's a reality that can actually happen?
Well, I mean, let's talk about it. The problem is that evictions show up on your state court record, right? I mean, that's where they are. And so we tried to get this done at the state level, and Senator Kiki Curls and I worked on it, and every year they blocked us, and it was the judges that blocked us. I want to figure out if there's something we can do at the city level that's similar to what we've done in other spaces. We focused, for instance, on saying you can't ask certain things when you're doing a job application. Is there a way we can work on expungement?
A workaround, like?
I'm just curious if there's a local solution. If we're going to get blocked at the state level, is there a local solution? I don't know the answer. I really don't.
So the final thing I want to say before we move on here is that the folks in this room wrote a people's housing platform that's pretty comprehensive, and not all of it is time limited. A lot of it is going to take a lot longer than your first 100 days. But things like Tiana's proposal about an investment from the city in non-market housing, I think the process needs to start in the first 100 days, or else we're going to wait for 75,000 more people to be evicted, and we can't do that. So I would suggest as a final thought here to review the People's Housing Platform, and we'd love to see a more comprehensive 100-day plan from you and from all the candidates for city council and for mayor sometime before the election.
I can't commit to giving you a comprehensive 100-day plan in the next 12 days. I'm sorry. It wouldn't have the thoughtfulness that you want in it. And but I can commit to reading the platform again. I have read it, and I can commit to reading it again.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you. Seriously. We hang around. Can we hang around a few minutes so we can take a group picture? People can ask individual questions.
Sure.
And then what?
Thank you so much for being here today. Do you have any questions of us?
I got a lot of questions for you. Wouldn't be me if I didn't. You've already told me you're staying engaged after the election. All right. I guess, and you're all voting, right? Or if you can. Right. Okay. So then, I mean, I guess the other thing I might ask is this. You know, the city does a lot, but there are a lot of other institutions that need to do things too. I'm not talking about going to DC. DC's a mess. I'm not even talking about going to Jeff City, because Jeff City's a mess. But I'm talking about the school district. I'm talking about our safety net hospitals. Are you all willing to go with me to places like Kansas City School District or our other school districts? Are you going to go with me to Truman Medical Center, like board meetings? Are you going to go with me to Board of Police Commissioners meetings?
Oh, yes.
What's relevant to what we're doing?
Yes.
Because to me, that's how we start to make sure this is all impactful. The thing I hate the most about government sometimes when people are like, well, that's not us. That's not our jurisdiction. I want this movement to be something that is in the minds of everyone, because housing touches everything.
Absolutely.
So that's, if you're willing to do that, then we have a good relationship going forward. And I'll show y'all all the ordinances in advance, and y'all can rewrite them and everything.
Now, Nicole and Alex will show you around the place.
Okay.
All right?
Show you everything that's wrong.
Right.
This is Alex.
Whose baby am I holding?
And before folks run away, we'll take a group picture outside after the tour, but feel free to go out and have a smoke or whatever in the meantime. Yes.
Put your arm to sleep.